Hey everybody, this is Nick, and this is a supplemental video to Bootstrap Farmer Radio where we take a look at a propagation business and we look at a case study that I look at for my own farm, and then we're also going to incorporate some video from Ann Medford's interview about her farm, One Drop Farm, that does transplants and seedlings for other farms and to the farmers market. So in this case study, we have to remember this is my specific scenario and my inputs. And the purpose of a feasibility study is for you to take some general guidelines and completely flesh out not only your business idea, but everything that leads up to those first and then subsequent rounds of sales that you can then take and kind of compress into a summarized business plan. So this is great if you're just getting started and don't know where to kind of even begin, or if you like most of us and you started a business and then you discover that there's holes in your operation and maybe a chance to fix some things. This kind of helps you go back and deconstruct where some of the issues may be. Or if you have everything kind of figured out, but you want to add a line of production or a service, this kind of helps you with flesh out those new ideas and see if it's going to work for your operation. So in this feasibility study, we're going to look at 8 components. And the components are the opportunity that presents itself within the market, the business summary, which is basically your idea to service that opportunity, the management structure, the market potential, the ideal client that comes out of that market potential, the marketing strategy for that ideal client, the economics surrounding both the build out, operations, pricing, profit, loss, all of that goes into basically the financials of the company. And then to see what your capital requirements are and in what type of time frame can you take care of those debt services. So if we were to look at my particular case study, this is what we looked at. We wanted to evaluate the profitability of an in-house flower production for another company that I own, which is a landscaping company. So the market opportunity was this spring, and we're going to show you the receipts later on. We spent $7,152.50 buying transplants, both for Victory Gardens, the vegetable production, and Blue Collar Paris, which is our management or our property management company. So we do 2 color change outs a year, which means at minimum we'll spend $14,000 a year just replacing annual flower change outs. Then we turn around and sell to the end users, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But we have the opportunity for twice a year to do these type of sales. This also does not take into account that we'll do a half a dozen landscapes for our established clients throughout the year. We only work for people that are on our client lists. We don't do any one-time operations, but we know that there's certain plants in this area that we'll use time and time again that it could be worth looking at future expansions. But for this particular model, we're just looking at annual bedding plants for that twice a year program. On the Paris Victory Garden side, we have land, we have the water infrastructure, we have a labor force that, given the size and scope of this particular addition to the company, we can implement this without much disruption in our regular day-to-day activities. So labor, skilled labor, land, infrastructure, it's all kind of working out. The business summary is Blue Collar Paris. We have the labor force and the equipment. We're landscapers, so we have tractors and all, and everything that we would need to build a much larger tunnel than we're even talking about here. So we can get that up and off the ground in less than 2 days. Then Paris Victory Gardens can take occupancy of the structure and grow out the flats that we're going to need, the flats of flowers that we're going to need for these landscapes twice a year. And then the parent company that manages both Victory Gardens and Blue Collar Paris actually can, instead of going to the bank, we can self-fund this thing. We're not paying interest. We can pay back the loans when it's best for us, when we have the cash flow. So that's some of the advantages that my company has But I want you to think about what opportunities you have. I'm trying to sell to my own landscape company. There's not a reason that you couldn't, if you wanted a high tunnel and wanted to pay for it, maybe this isn't something you wanted to do forever. But if you had to do it for a season just to pay for your infrastructure, maybe as a side hustle or working your way into farming, this could be a great way to very quickly and very scale in a very scalable manner sell to another landscaper or another farmer. And we're going to hear from Ann Medford about selling to other farmers. So whenever people think about farming, oftentimes it's not going business to business, farmer to farmer. What type of market opportunities are out there, and why would one farmer choose not to do their own seedlings or transplants?
Sure. Growing for other farms is a lot of fun. And what other farms I think are looking for, one is space, and two is their own cost effectiveness. So instead of turning on a 30 by 90 in April or even February for onions, they often want early season space so they can turn on their greenhouses later and just start their whole seedling operation later and their employees coming on later. So they need space and cost savings in their own greenhouses. They also may be more set up for one family of crops versus another. We have certain kinds of germination chambers, et cetera, that get slow germinating things up quickly, and maybe they haven't invested in that yet. Um, and a concerted staff to taking care of seedlings, whereas their spring, maybe a couple of springs they're putting up hoop houses or focused elsewhere, or they're opening up new land, and it allows them to focus on other aspects of the farm while we're taking care of their plants.
I think there's an opportunity to also capitalize on, and I didn't know this going into it, but one thing that I learned from Johnny's extensive library and reference material is different seeds, of course, pop and germinate at different temperatures and under different conditions. If you're going to specialize in one versus the other, and especially if you're not doing your own and they're coming to somebody like you, is that a service that you could additionally offer? Hey, we can do peppers because we have heat mats or something like that.
Absolutely. We've got a variety of ways that we germinate plants, germ chambers, heat mats, etc. We also do artichokes for folks, and so we know how to vernalize seedlings, and that's something that either maybe they're not experienced with or don't want to fuss with. So we will start flats of artichokes, get them up early, stick them somewhere cold for an appropriate amount of time, and wake them back up for a good crop of artichokes. Yeah, definitely. We've figured out systems for different crop families that maybe the farms haven't invested in yet.
So now you have an idea of two different avenue streams, one direct to consumer, one business to business, B2B. And I'm hoping now that you're starting to get some ideas of how far this can go. You can take it to the farmers market, you can take it to their farmers, you can sell to other landscapers, or maybe apartment complexes, or anybody that would buy a large volume of flowers, or even a part of it. If we further look into the business plan, Blue Collar Services and Victory Gardens both would have the opportunity after a year of getting this under our belt to decide, are we going to build another tunnel? Would we service another line of income? Would we service somebody else? Would we grow bedding plants? We have other options, but for year one, giving everything that I have going on, we're going to take this still to this day, step by step, keeping it small, keeping it scalable. Look, the worst thing that could happen is I get an extra greenhouse out of this whole deal, and I certainly could use that. So the management structure would pretty much be exactly what it's always been. Under contract with these long-term clients, some of them being with us for the last 18 years, the vast majority of them being with us for over 12 years. They don't tell me what to plant, so it's up to me to decide every season, what are we going to plant, for me to do the design work, figure out the quantities that we need to order. The only thing that would change is instead of ordering a few hundred flats of flowers, I would order a smaller amount of flats, but in plug form that may have 288 plugs per flat, and I would have to order that in time to grow them out for the season. So my time frame gets bumped up a little bit, but this is something I've done forever, and I'm very comfortable doing it. It's fun for me. It's something I enjoy. I enjoy the design work, and that's something we can incorporate very easily. So I will continue to do the landscape design and the ordering. We'll just bump up the time frame. Blue Collar Paris will continue to put out the flowers and bill the clients and do all the banking that's necessary to bring that income in. Paris Victory Gardens will grow this for blue collar, make the sale to blue collar at a wholesale level, and then blue collar will then in turn bill at the retail level. So the parent company gets the first sale wholesalely from one entity to the next, and then we will make an additional sale from blue collar Paris to the end user. Interesting thing to note, we can control what we're growing a little bit better. I believe that we can have a vastly superior product that's more customized to what we need. Not only that, the end user client will not notice any changes in price increase or something like that, while we get to maintain all the profits. So we're taking out the middleman, doing it in house, and as you can see, we're going to use it very little infrastructure and skill sets and assets that we already have. Moving on to market potential, again, Blue Collar Paris does not have to worry about, Victory Gardens does not have to worry about where's this stuff going. We already have an established line of sales. So where does that leave you? That leads you to go out and figure out where this market potential is. Go talk to landscapers, go talk to retail nurseries, go talk to hardware stores, anybody that's currently selling these items now or that potentially could fit that in with their business plan. Could be a point of sale at a hotel at a resale level. Could you do this even smaller and have a stand, a farm stand? Could you incorporate this into your farmer's market? Could you utilize a email list and almost have a CSA model that is only a couple of weeks? It's up for you to decide and be creative with where these potential markets are. Our ideal client is thankfully us. Um, we already know that we have the ability to take on a lot of capacity for these flats. Looking at this structure, I want to point out that we only want to grow about 80% of what we could use. Number one, I don't know what next year is going to look like. So if I could produce a lot more, I don't know if I would, because I simply don't know that far in advance. As fast as everything is moving for me personally right now, I don't know where we're going to be. So I don't want to overgrow. I want to still order from the farm that we've been using for the last 18 years, which is about 20 miles away, because there's going to be some specialty stuff that I don't want to grow. We want to grow really basic, hardy stuff that we use a lot of. For us, that would be things like begonias, Dusty Miller, lantana, things of that nature. Maybe some ground cover that we incorporate seasonally, and that way we're not stuck with a bunch of like oddball stuff. I can order the oddball fancy stuff from them, still at a great rate, still at a wholesale level, but that also saves us some room in the high tunnel for me to experiment in, for us to try new things, and it gives us a little breathing room without having to worry about selling every single flat. Your ideal client is going to come out of your market research. The neat thing about selling business to business is, instead of trying to find 100 clients to support your business, maybe you find 5 that takes on the same amount of material, and now you're just having to talk to 5 or 6 different people versus trying to bring in everybody and their brother and sister to try to come to your place or your farmer's market. Less amount of people, a little less, sometimes half as much revenue coming in, but the ability to sell a massive amount of quantity at the wholesale level might work out better with your schedule, depending on where you're at or what you have the capacity to deal with time wise and brain power wise. For those of us that are going to the farmers markets, like, the more clients the better, but for this, it seems like you would have to deal with less clients, which means less communication, less headache to achieve the same sales goals.
Yeah, there are added logistics for sure. Because if you have however many farms and every one of them has a different specific um, varieties they're growing, you need really good tracking, and you've got to make a new seeding calendar every year with the appropriate varieties. You may come across varieties that you're not familiar with that you need to learn in a hurry, as far as how far out you need to see them before they're going to be ready. But that's the part I like. That little bit of challenge is, it's not so far outside what I'm normally growing that I'm not willing to give it a shot, and usually, you know, guess pretty correctly. So yeah, it's fewer clients, but it's clients that really need attention to detail and to get what they ordered.
I
You
think,
don't want to, you've got their broccoli crop in your hands. So
yeah,
I would say
it's a
attention to detail is a advantageous personality trait for doing myriad varieties of plants.
it's
Uh,
something to keep in mind as these people are relying on you for their future income. So
right.
it's pretty serious.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I like it. I'm up for it.
So even though when it comes to the marketing strategy, we're already selling to ourselves, that doesn't mean we're not going to incorporate uh, this marketing opportunity into what we have. I think about how nice it's going to be to show uh, building the high tunnel, planting out the flats, watching them grow just like you would with vegetable production, but reminding our blue collar clients, look, we're growing this custom for you. We're maintaining our employees. We're having to hire more people on. Our employees are making more money. More money is staying within the Paris community versus going out into the next few towns over. Uh, Strengthening our company strengthens our employees' economics, strengthens Paris's economics. It's a great story to tell. It's the truth, and it helps further connect us to not only growing but doing really neat things on our farm. It goes beyond vegetable production. It goes beyond ornamental production, and it helps with that story brand negative narrative that we're so reliant on for our marketing. So even though I don't have to spend any ad dollars because all of this stuff is essentially pre-sold before we even start, I'm still going to use the opportunity to help further tell our story. The economics, I'm kind of going to gloss over this slide because there's a lot to be digested here. It's something that you can print out and look at, but here in a minute, we're kind of going to go over the actual numbers itself. One thing to keep in mind is Paris Victory Gardens this year was buying flats at a wholesale level at $9.50. There's some places I can get it for $6.50, but it's not as good. And there's some places I can buy it for $12, but it's way out of the way. This 950 is using the same farm I've used forever. They're very reliable. They don't charge me delivery fees. Uh, so even at 950 and us reselling it at $19, we make a great profit. But looking at our numbers, we can show that now this is the first round of numbers that we went through, but that first round showed that we were going to be able to produce one flat of flowers for $4.67, yielding a profit at the end use sale of $19, of a profit of $14.33. That's over 300% profit margin. It's great. So I'll take that all day long. So even cut in half at 100 to 150%, depending on the situation or the time of year or whatever, um, that's a great markup. So taking out that middleman and doubling that amount of markup is great. The capital requirements, we're going to go over that in the economics study, so I'm not going to really talk about it much right now. Just know that we're looking at upfront capital expenses to get the operation up and running, variable expenses for operations to continue to run and be able to produce what we need to produce in a timely manner. And then it also takes a look at our potential income, our capital expenses, our variable expenses minus down to see our profit and loss. So all that's going to be covered in the worksheets below. So now we're going to look at my feasibility study for my very, very specific situation. And then we're going to look at your blank profit and loss worksheet, which actually wound up being a lot better than the one I originally used, which brings us to a good point. You should run this feasibility study a minimum of 3 times. The more the better. Run it past some test clients, run it past somebody you trust or a mentor to see if you're missing anything. These 8 points, it covers a lot. We did not want this to be overwhelming, but there's a lot of things to consider, which you'll kind of see a little bit more of in the P&L worksheets. But before we get to that, here's the cell counts, or here's the trays that we decided to use. We have always used flats of 18 count 4-inch pots. Looking at the numbers now, we're going to go with these 32 count cell trays because we can double the amount of production and save a lot on labor in the handling, because we have to move these things from the greenhouse to the trailer, drive this cat across town, move it off of the trailer into staging areas, sometimes right into the beds. We generally have to move flats 3 or 4 times, and to be able to do that with half of the labor is more than makes up for the amount of cost that this was extra that we were looking at with the 18 count. It was minimal then, but when we look at the labor savings, we pay our guys a very nice living wage, so this was huge for us. Furthermore, we wanted to look at making sure that the house that we were building, the hoop house that we were building, was going to be as efficient as possible, using up all the space. We decided to use a 2-tier system, 1 with flats on the ground, 2 with flats either suspended on rack tables, or suspended by chains with tables hanging from the rafters. At this point, we still haven't decided yet, but we do have a workable shelving allowance. So we actually put these trays on the ground, measured them out, made sure that this made sense. Listening to Ann talk about moving flats around, we learned quite a bit there. And even you mentioned just small things like moving the dirt to the trays versus moving trays of dirt from one end to the other made a huge difference in your scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm constantly crunching the numbers is not my bailiwick, but it's something I'm fascinated by. And I realized that the job I like doing the least also was the one that was most efficient, which I think is why I was frustrated by it. And yeah, so we figured out, a lot of farms are limited by their infrastructure, whether you have cement floor in your nursery or not, or those kinds of things. And we figured out that it's easier to move all the filled trays. It's easier to fill the trays in one building and move them out and pot them up in the nursery than it is to pot them up where you fill them and then move live plants to the nursery.
There's another picture that we look at. We took the compost that we buy, also at a wholesale level, and filled up cups and did testing to see how many cups, how many flats that we could fill with 1 bag of compost. That way we knew, A, how many flats we could fit in the tunnel that was going to be very efficient. B, we knew how much compost that we would need to fill all these flats. And given the amount of space and flats and cups per flat, we knew how many plugs we needed to order to make sure production levels were where we needed them to be. Here's just a simple diagram, a 12-foot tunnel, 1 with 2 horizontal, or 2 vertical, 1 horizontal row would be a 5-foot wide shelf, and then a 4-foot wide shelf with 2 vertical stacked trays would allow us to have a 48-foot run at 4 foot, a 48 run at 5 foot, a 3 foot by 4 foot roughly space on the end wall where we don't need it to be open, and then it gives us a 3-foot walkway plus the same amount of space underneath on the ground, maybe a little bit extra on the end where we can stack more on the floor. So we get now into our feasibility study, where we look at the opportunity, the business summary, the management structure, the market potential, the ideal clients, our marketing strategy, the economics, and the capital requirements, all of what we just went over. But I wanted to make sure and do the exercise myself. So here you can print it out and take a look at it later, and it prints out larger than what's on these slides. But we went through the exercise just like you would. There's probably holes and things that we missed. This was the first round, and we've been working on this all week, so there were several iterations. But just know that I would much rather make my mistakes here on paper and flesh it out now and get it, as close to possible to perfect now than not doing an exercise like this and paying for mistakes with my checkbook, or paying for mistakes uh, financially, or even worse sometimes is the loss of time. Maybe you go and do all of this and mess it up so bad that you still have to go buy transplants. That's like the worst, right? So I would rather make sure I make my mistakes here. Some of you are going to go through this with a fine tooth comb. You're going to find mistakes. I hope you do, because that illustrates I'm not perfect, but at least we have a system to try stuff out. And that's the whole reason doing what we're doing here. This is our profit and loss worksheet, where we look at our capital expense, we look at our variable expenses, and then we start fleshing out our profit and loss. If we move on to the white label feasibility study, it gives a very brief outline of what we're asking you to do. It asks you the questions for you to fill out at your own pace and time as you do your own due diligence and market research. And then it moves on to the blank profit and loss. Really pay attention here. Number one, disclaimer, we're not lawyers, we're not CPAs. You must make sure that you're following your local requirements, uh, setting up your business entity correctly, make sure you're doing your taxes right. Don't let that stuff come bite you in the ass later on. It's far cheaper to get your business set up and operating correctly in the beginning than to get tagged and have to go back and fix it later and then pay all those fees. Just bite the bullet, get it fixed now, especially if you're starting out small. Then you can do incremental increases. But I went ahead and put this in. There's going to be some of this that you don't need. There's going to be some things here that you do need that I don't have listed. It has to be made your own, which is what we did with the blue collar feasibility study. But just know that the fundamentals are the same. This has you go through the exercise and the brainstorming that's necessary. So I'm not going to go through all that. I'm trying to keep this as digestible as possible. But take a look at this. Look at your capital expenses. Look at your variable expenses. Think about the cost of goods sold, and really visualize every part of your operation. Visualize walking into the greenhouse. So if we just start there, if you're going to build a greenhouse, you're going to need a door. If you need a door, you need hinges. If you need hinges, you need a door frame. If you have a door, you need a latch. You need all of these little tiny components that add up over time. So if you are bootstrapping and you are building this yourself, or using, the kit plus stuff that you're going to have to get local, think of every single little thing as best you can to avoid any surprises later on. Think of the hoses that you might need. Think of running the water lines that you may have to. You're going to have sprayers. You're going to have fertilizer, either sprayers or granular controls. Hopefully you're having to implement IPM programs, so you're keeping up with pest and disease and mold and fungus and everything that can affect us in agriculture. Just really take a look. Ask your CPA, should I rent my own land for myself to avoid any legalities? That varies from state to state. Again, we're not lawyers. This is part of your due diligence. It's not up to us to make sure you're running your company great. It's us just to show you the possibilities of what these things could mean and be. If we look at your income projections, the size of the house and the setup of the shelving, the size of trays, the quantity of sales per tray, all will tell you your capacity. Some of you may be growing 1 gallon pots, some of you may be growing baskets. We don't know. That's up for you to decide based off what your market is telling you. Your capacity, your different sales channels, the cost to produce, both from the variable expense and the capital expense, will net you your profit. Your profit can then be boiled down to your profit and loss percentage. That's something that you can summarize in a business plan, take to investors, take to a financial institution, they're going to want to see this kind of thing. If you go get a loan based off of an idea, they're going to want to see the work. It's just like high school math class. You have to show your work. And coming at it with something like this will really show them you looked at everything that you possibly could. And I hope you come up with some more stuff to look at other than what we provide. But we wanted to keep this simple. We didn't want to overwhelm with just a lot of information. It's 8 points. Just take 1 point at a time, relax, go over it a little bit, bounce the ideas around in the group, see what happens. I mean, the worst that can happen is something that really could be the worst thing that could happen is you go through this and realize this is not going to be profitable, and think of that time commitment that you put in here and how much money you saved by not going off the handle with an idea that wasn't going to work. That's our goal here, is to flesh out problems before you spend any money. All of this information is downloadable at www.bootstrapfarmer.com/pages/incubator. We're going to be doing several exercises like this. All of this information is free. If it's right for you, great. If it's not, hey, just leave it for somebody else. But just know this is how Brandon and I have been approaching our businesses over the last few years. We just hope to help become part of the network. Ask questions and see what's right for you. We really appreciate your time on this and letting us do this. We're learning just as much by teaching this and by actually doing it ourselves as we hope that you are too. So it's a good circle that we're forming, and we really appreciate your time. On a quick note, I did want to illustrate that it's vitally important that everybody understands that this is not stuff we're just making up out of thin air. So in full transparency, these are some of the actual invoices that I paid this year. This one particular order was for $4,326, another one for $541, another one for $312, and another one for $1,973. That's a total transplanted cost of around, just this year, of around $7,100. And then this final one shows where we bought a full truckload, 22 pallets of mulch and compost for these jobs. And I have this on here. We're buying our compost. It's a 40-pound compost bag. There's 60 bags on a pallet. I'm paying $1.25. Now, when you come down here to this pallet charge, we get that back. We pay it up front, and we get it back when we return the pallets. The forklift fee and this fuel surcharge, I don't mind paying that at all because it saves us a ton of labor. But just notice that in the P&L, there is a section in there for delivery fees and charges and things like that. So pay attention to the fine print. But just know that this is actual numbers from my actual company that we did and billed for this year, and this is at a wholesale level. If you go through your feasibility study, see if you can buy things at a wholesale level. It oftentimes doesn't take anything but simply setting up a company with a wholesaler, and it's a good opportunity to save a lot of money.
Well, yeah, I think I mentioned this last time. The quote that just always sticks in my head when I think about a farmer paying attention is, the best fertilizer is the farmer's footsteps. It's attention to detail. And that pays off a lot with seedlings. I'll notice day-to-day changes among the health of the plants in the hoop house. And if I weren't hand watering, I would have to make a diligent schedule to stick to do basically the same thing and look at every plant and every tray.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I'm just thinking back to the time when it was all good, the golden era.